Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, as you know, this is the third lecture on our lecture series Religion and Culture. In the last two lectures, we have already discussed about religion. Today, we will mainly discussing on culture of India. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio the same resource person, Dr. Amit Sharma. He is a renowned social science thinker. His knowledge and experience will help us to understand the culture in a new perspective. So on his behalf, I welcome Dr. Sharma for EduSat lecture on this very topic, culture of India. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Today we will try to understand the nature and function of Indian culture. As I said, in the context of religion, Indian culture is a very ancient culture. This is at least 10,000 years old culture, and there are two views about Indian culture. Some people, the majority of sociologists, think that there is one culture at the all India level, and that is civilizational in nature. But there is a minority view represented by Professor T.K. Umen, who says that there are cultures in India, there are plurality of cultures in India, and India can be considered many things. For example, India can be considered as a nation state, it can be considered as a state, it can be also considered as a civilization. I personally think that both views have some truth in it. There is an all India culture which can be called Indian culture, but there are also subcultures associated with religious groups, associated with linguistic groups, associated with regional blocks. For example, we can discuss the Hindu culture, the Muslim culture, the Christian culture, the Sikh culture, the tribal culture, the Parsi culture, the Buddhist culture, and the Jain culture in India also. We can also discuss the village culture, the Kasbai culture or suburban culture, and the town culture and the metropolitan culture. There are differences in this sense between one culture and the other culture, but there are also some commonality between all of these. Today we will try to understand what is common in all these subcultures of Indian civilization. I think, and I have also written about it, the most important cultural trait in India is the cosmic view. In other cultures, you have regional view, you have religious view, you have racial view. It is narrow in outlook. But in India, culture is cosmic in nature. It tries to encompass the whole of cosmos within Indian culture. There is a saying in Sanskrit, Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande. What is in the particle, the same is true about the cosmos. Both are made up of the same element. Therefore, there is natural tolerance inbuilt in our culture. Indians are one of the most tolerant people on earth. They try to tolerate differences very, very naturally. very, very spontaneously. Therefore, tolerance can be defined as the second most important aspect of Indian culture after the cosmic view. The third defining feature of Indian culture is the ideal or ethos of the joint family. The norm of joint family is very prevalent in Indian culture. So far as the household is concerned or the residential unit of the family is concerned, it may be both nuclear or joint. But so far as the culture is concerned, joint family or Sanjukt Parivar is the ethos of Indian culture. The fourth defining feature of Indian culture is the spirit of saving. Every Indian tries to save some amount of one's earning. In contrast to the Western culture or modern culture, which is a spending culture, people spend beyond their reach. The credit card culture is very popular in the West. In many other countries, people are not very much concerned about the saving. But Indians have developed a habit of saving from the very childhood. Why do they save? Why do we save? We save for the progeny. We save for the next culture, next generation. Why? Because we think that we have a duty towards the coming generation. We have a duty towards others. In India, there is a saying that खुद खाना प्रकृति है. It is natural to earn and eat it. It is natural to earn and spend on one's own. दूसरे की कमाई खाना विकृति है. It is degrading to live a life out of others' earning. खुद कमाना, दूसरों को खिलाना और जो बचे वो खाना संस्कृति है. To earn, then offer it to others, and what is left over should be consumed by oneself. This is culture. The root term of Sanskriti is Kriti. Kriti in Sanskrit means creation. Samskriti means creating a beautiful thing. Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. We should create the true, we should create the beautiful, and we should create the liberating. Satya is truth, Sundar is beautiful, and Shivam is liberating. This is the defining feature, the fifth defining feature of Indian culture. Indians try to create something which is true, beautiful, and liberating at the same time. Therefore, in Indian culture, the art and craft is one and the same thing. In other cultures, art is something very different from the craft. Crafts are useful. Arts are usually beyond instrumental use. It is called usually high culture. But in our culture, in Indian culture, there is not much difference between the high culture and the low culture. Actually, there is no such concept in India. Robert Redfield, the American anthropologist, has coined two terms, the little tradition and the great tradition. The little tradition is usually translated as folk culture or lok sanskriti, and the great tradition is usually referred to as classical culture or shastriya sanskriti. But Anand Kentish Kumar Swami has opined that in India, the little culture, the little tradition or lok sanskriti is not inferior to the classical sanskriti, shastriya sanskriti or the great tradition. Therefore, every tradition is one and the same. There is some difference between the folk culture and the classical culture, but that is not a difference between the superior and the inferior. That is a difference which consists of its way of acquiring. You acquire folk culture or lok sanskriti during work. For example, there is a carpenter, there is a blacksmith or lohar. He is doing his work of carpentry. Now, when he is doing the carpentry, his children or his disciples are watching him or her. During the process of watching, they also assist the carpenter. And in this process, informally, the lok sanskriti or the folk culture is acquired. In the same way, there is a tribal dance or a village dance, and the older dancers are dancing and the new dancers are watching them. But they do not watch merely the dance. They also try to participate in it in their own way. And nobody knows when the learning started and when it ended. In contrast, the classical Sanskriti or the Shastriya Sanskriti is learnt formally. One goes to an ustad, one goes to a guru, one goes to a teacher or an institute where the classical ragas are taught in music or dance. What are ragas? Ragas are rhythms. They are of many variety. In the same way, there are rasas. They are of 9 variety. Rasa can be translated into flavors. There are 9 flavors of life. There are 9 flavors of dance and music. This is also an aspect of Indian culture. I would like to say that language is the most important ingredient of culture anywhere in the world. But music and dance is not the constituent part of culture everywhere. In India, dance and music is the soul of Indian culture. This is the chief vehicle through which culture is transmitted from one generation to the other generation. In the same way, Indian culture is also something which tries to commune with, which tries to conceptualize the change of seasons. Therefore, Indian culture has developed regional calendars at the all India level. There are around 400 calendars or panchangas in India. The English calendar, which begins from January and ends in December, is used for the official purposes. But for practical purposes, Hindu months, which are determined by the movement of the sun into different rasis, is the most important concept through which change of season is conceptualized. These are 12. One is Chaitra or Chat, second is Vaishakh, third one is Jet or Jest, fourth one is Ashadh, fifth one is Sawan, sixth one is Bhado, seventh one is Kartik. In this way, we come to 12 months, and the last month is Phagun. These 12 months are very different from the January to December months. The difference is that January to December, the 12 transitions of sun does not correspond with the change of season in India. Whereas from Chaitra to Phalgun, the 12 classification of months in India corresponds to the ecological changes, the monsoon changes, the weather changes taking place in India. The next important aspect of Indian culture is emphasis on agriculture. India is not the agricultural country from the very beginning. India has been primarily the urban culture, the urban civilization from the very beginning. The most important phase of Indian culture begins with the Indus Valley civilization that was urban in nature. From Indus Valley civilization up to 18th century, India was primarily urban and industrial in nature. But even then, agriculture and village was very important in Indian culture. What was the difference? The urban culture was important in itself. It was important because the majority of Indians were engaged in non-agricultural activities. But the elite of Indian culture used to live in villages. This sounds contradictory today, because today village is considered inferior to towns and cities, and there is a huge migration which is taking place from village to urban spaces. Therefore, when I say that India has been primarily an urban culture, industrial culture, it sounds contradictory, because things have changed in the last 200 years dramatically, qualitatively. There was huge deindustrialization in India during the British rule. There was huge migration from urban spaces to the rural space, that is village, during the British rule. When the British were ruling over India, the urban centers in India like Agra, Varanasi, Lahore was much more larger and densely populated than London or Paris. But what happened? Due to the different policies adopted by the British, the industrial activity and the urban industries were destroyed, and people were pushed from urban spaces to villages. Therefore, there was a large population in villages in India which were forced to live on agricultural and allied activities. Otherwise, up to 18th century, people used to live in villages voluntarily. They did not engage in agriculture only as an occupation. Agriculture actually was a mode of culture. They not only produced food grains, but they also produced medicines, medicinal plants. It is said in the Vedas that the food is medicine and medicine is food. The preventive medicine in India, that is Ayurveda, was much more developed than the curative medicine. The emphasis in Indian culture is on making the body and mind robust so that infections do not strike at the body, so that people do not fall ill. Therefore, people used to live in villages for three things. They used to create new crops, new medicinal plants. They used to create arts and crafts. They used to create music and dance. They used to create a better way of living. They used to create the art of living and the science of living. Therefore, they did not go to the village because they were not capable of living a life in towns and cities. Rather, they voluntarily chose a life of a sadhaka. Sadhaka is very difficult to be conceptualized into English language. A sadhaka is one who is seeker of truth, who is seeker of God, who is seeker of divinity. In India, you are not growing your field, you are not plowing your field, you are not, roping new crops. What you do? You are not only growing crops, you are trying to give birth to new forms of life. Actually, every grain, is grain, is full of life. Every plant is full of life. This is what J.C. Bose, Jagdish Chandra Bose demonstrated through his botanical experiments. Actually, agriculture is a means of sadhana. Agriculture is a method of meditation. Agriculture is a way of realizing God and divinity. It is as good as dance and music. There is a music in agriculture. Indians used to feel it. Therefore, you will find that every activity of agriculture is followed and succeeded by folk dance and folk music. Whenever they are doing agricultural activity, they sing. And what do they sing? They sing a song which connects nature to culture, which connects culture to superculture, that is spirituality. Therefore, there is a spiritual ecology in Indian civilization, in Indian culture. This spiritual ecology is the next defining feature of Indian culture. Now, what has been the history of Indian culture? The history of Indian culture is divided in many ways. One of the most popular ways found in Hindu society is to divide the time into 4 yugas. They are called Sat Yuga or Kriti Yuga, when Harishchandra was the most important king and when Indra was the most important god. Then Parsuram was the most important avatar of Lord Vishnu. It is followed by Treta. During Treta, Dasarath was the most important king. Ram was the most important avatar of Lord Vishnu. And Ravana was the counterpart of Ram in Sri Lanka. Ayodhya was the most important place where Lord Ram resided. Ayodhya was also the place where lots of things took place, which is glorious, which is gloriously depicted in Ramayana of Valmiki and Ramcharitmanas of Tulsidas. It is followed by Dwapar, when Lord Krishna was the avatar of Lord Vishnu, and the most important king was Dhritarashtra and Pandu. It is followed by Kali Yuga. Lord Buddha was the most important avatars of Lord Vishnu, and many kings followed Lord Buddha. One was Bimbisar, second was Ajatasattu, third was Chandragupta Maurya, fourth was Ashoka, fifth was Vikramaditya, sixth was Harshvardhan, something like this. This is the Hindu way of dividing time. But there is also a modern way of dividing time. Actually, the modern way of dividing time took place in 18th century. In India, they divide Indian history into 3 parts: the ancient, the medieval, and the modern. Now, to understand this division of time into ancient, medieval, and modern, we must understand the historical context of this classification in the West. The history of the West is divided into primarily 2 parts: before Jesus Christ and after Jesus Christ. This is called BC and AD. Before Christ is the period when pagan religions were very dominant in the West. The ancient Roman Empire, the ancient Greek Empire, the ancient Macedonian Empire were very dominant. When Christianity came to Europe in 4th century AD started. After Jesus Christ, the European culture, European time started. From Christian point of view, before Jesus Christ, Europeans were living in darkness. They were living in ignorance. and after Jesus Christ, they used to live in light. They used to live in a particular type of civilization which is superior. Now, this view of the Christians was challenged by the modern people in Europe itself. Now, when modernity started in Europe, we cannot pinpoint one date. Modernity is the product of many factors. One was Renaissance, which took place in 13th century Italy, particularly in Florence. From 13th century to 18th century, modernity was crystallized. In 16th century, religious reformation took place when the Catholic Church was divided into two parts, the Catholic and the Protestants. The Protestant church was itself divided into three parts: the followers of Martin Luther, the followers of Zwingli, and followers of Calvin, John Calvin. Then Industrial Revolution took place. There are two industrial revolutions in Europe. One took place around 16th century in Spain and Portugal and Netherlands. This was an industrial revolution in Catholic countries where the metal was copper. The second industrial revolution took place in 18th century, and iron was the metal of industry. It took place in England and France. England was a Protestant country and France was a Catholic country. Later on it was followed by Germany. Now, two other events became very important. One was the growth of science and technology in Europe. The first university in Europe was established in Paris, that is France, in 13th century. By 14th century, England also had its university, Oxford and Cambridge. Now, during this period, that is from 13th to 18th century, Europeans divided their history into three parts: ancient, which was considered glorious; medieval, which was supposed to be a dark age; and modern, which was supposed to be a progressive age. Now, the Europeans said that from 14th century AD to 13th century AD, this was the dark age of Europe. Therefore, the medieval was equated with the dark age. Now, when Europeans came to India as ruler from 1757, from the Battle of Plassey, the British occupied Bengal as their colony. From then onwards, they said that India also has three types of culture: the ancient culture, which is the Hindu culture, which was the golden age of India; the medieval culture, which was primarily the Muslim culture, which was the dark age of India; and modern culture, which started with the coming of the Europeans in 18th century, is the progressive age of India. This was the basic classification of Indian culture by the Europeans. Some Indians also believed in this classification. They also thought that the ancient Hindu culture is the golden culture of India, whereas the medieval culture of India is a dark age of India, This was the culture when India was ruled by the Muslim rulers of many countries, Turkey, Mongolia, Afghanistan, Iran, etc. But some Indians, and one of them was Mahatma Gandhi, disagreed with this. Another Indian, Radha Kamal Mukherjee, disagreed with this. Another Indian, A.K. Saran, disagreed with this. Another Indian, Dharampal, disagreed with this. And I also disagree with this. I do not think that medieval Indian culture was a period of dark age. The medieval culture in India did not begin in 4th century. In contrast to the Europe, the ancient India did not lasted until 4th century AD. Rather, the ancient culture in India is covered from the time of the Buddha to 12th century AD. This was the period when India was ruled primarily by the Hindu and Buddhist rulers of India. There were many invasions during this period also by the Huns, by the Kusans, and also by some of the Muslim invaders. But these invaders could not rule over India. They came, they looted, and they went. For the first time, India was ruled by the foreigners during the 12th century AD. The last indigenous ruler was Prithviraj Chauhan, who was defeated by Muhammad Ghori of Ghor. Unfortunately or fortunately, Muhammad Ghori died and he was succeeded by his slave commander Qutbuddin Aibak. Qutbuddin Aibak was succeeded by Iltutmish, and Iltutmish was succeeded by Razia Sultan. Why I wanted to say this is the following. I wanted to emphasize that Indian culture did not consist only of ancient India. Ancient Indian culture is not only the golden age of India. That was glorious, but there were also weaknesses during this period. We were not able to fight with the foreign invaders. There was some problem in our defense system. Then, when the Muslim rulers came from outside, everything was not destroyed. Therefore, I refuse to accept that the medieval India, which is usually considered a period between 12th and 18th centuries, a period of 600 years, was not the dark age of India. It is a fact that during this period, India was ruled by the foreigners. But every foreign ruler was not similar to the other foreign ruler. There were differences. Secondly, in Indian culture, the state was never supreme. In other cultures, the state has been the center of culture and civilization. In Indian culture, the state was one of the organs of the society. The society was more strong than the state. And it is not only during the medieval period that India was ruled by different dynasties, different ruling families. From ancient times, India was not ruled by one state. India was not ruled by one emperor. India was not ruled by one king. Political unity was never established in India. India was united by cultural factors. India was united by artistic factors. India was united by civilizational factors. India was united by the cosmic factors. I would like to say that during the medieval period also India was a very, very prosperous culture. Our prosperity continued up to 18th century when the Muslims were ruling over India, and our per capita income was next to none. Actually, India and China were first and second economies from ancient times up to 18th century. Sometimes China surpassed India, sometimes India surpassed China, but primarily India had the lead and it was followed by the China. There was a very good cordial relationship between India and China from ancient times. Many Chinese came to India to study at Takshila, to study at Nalanda, to study at Vikramshila. Many Chinese pilgrims came to India. Many Chinese travelers came to India. India was not only economically prosperous, India was also one of the most educated society of the world up to 18th century. Indians were one of the most literate societies up to 18th century. Education was widely spread in India, and it is also a fact which was documented by Dharampal through the British sources, on the basis of British sources. Dharampal in his book The Beautiful Tree says that in India the education was not dominated by the Brahmins, as sometimes some critics of India have asserted. Rather, the teachers of Indian schools came from all the castes, including the Dalits, including the lower castes. Therefore, not only the students but also the teachers came from different castes. In other words, India was a culturally very vibrant society up to 18th century. India was also one of the most healthy society of the world. The health of the Indians was very good up to 18th century. They used to eat nutritious food and nuts and food and fruit. There were good doctors, Ayurvedic doctors and Unani doctors in India, who used to not only diagnose and treat, but they also used to do surgery. India was also good in science and technology. Dharampal has also written a book, Indian Science and Technology in 18th century. Therefore, I would like to say that Indian culture during the medieval period was also a very interesting culture, a very important culture, a very innovative culture, where the Hindus and the Muslims played very important roles in synthesizing a Hindustani culture. Hindi and Urdu are two languages or one language. There is a controversy. But most deep scholars of languages say that actually Hindi and Urdu are one language written in two scripts. The originator of Hindi and Urdu is one person, Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro, who was a disciple of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, is regarded as the father of both languages, Hindi and Urdu. And the basic difference between Hindi and Urdu is that Hindi is written in Devanagari script, whereas Urdu is written in the Persian script. Otherwise, the majority of the terms of Hindi and Urdu are one and the same thing. Similar words are used. But when you add more Sanskrit words in Hindi, when you use more Tatsam words, Hindi becomes very similar to Sanskrit and Urdu becomes very similar to Persian and Arabic. But this is a later day development. Initially, Hindi and Urdu were one language. In the same way, in Hindustani music, both Hindus and Muslims experimented. And even today, you will find very interesting phenomenon. For example, there was Ustad Bismillah Khan. He was a Muslim by birth. He was a devout Muslim by faith. But his day began with his playing of Sahnai at Kashi Vishwanath temple of Lord Shiva at Varanasi. In the same way, there is a family of Dagars. The Dagar family of India, they are Muslims, but their music is devoted to Hindu gods and goddesses. In the same way, there are many Hindu disciples of Muslim ustads and Muslim disciples of Hindu ustads. In other words, during the medieval period, the society and culture in India was very vibrant. There was a dialectical relationship between the Hindu and the Muslim subcultures, and we produced monuments like the Taj Mahal. We produced monuments like the Lal Killa. We produced monuments like the Qutub Minar. These are the marvels of even contemporary culture of India. Then the British came. When the British came, during the same period, the French had also come in South India. But the French were defeated by the Britishers, and finally the British were able to rule over the whole of India. But during the same period, there were 600 princely estates in India. In other words, even the British were not able to unify India politically. After independence in 1947, India was divided into India and Pakistan. Therefore, even after partition, Indian culture was continued in India and Pakistan. In other words, I am saying that Indian culture is not found only in India, but it extends to Nepal, it extends to Bangladesh, it extends to Pakistan, it extends to Sri Lanka. Indian culture has a larger territory than the political boundary of India. Some people call it South Asian culture. This South Asian culture or SAARC culture is also called Akhand Bharatiya culture or Unified Greater Indian culture. But Indian culture is not found only in South Asia. Indian culture is also found among Indians who are living outside India. They are living in different countries. They are called Indian diaspora. They are living in Africa. They are living in different parts of Europe. They are living in Americas. They are living in different countries of Asia. Therefore, we can talk of contemporary Indian culture in mainland India. We can talk of Indian culture within the SAARC countries. We can also talk of Indian culture in the Indian diaspora. There is similarity and there are differences between these different forms of Indian culture, but there is unity in diversity. These differences are more in form than in content. Indian culture is one and the same everywhere, but it is expressed in different languages, different ecological regions, different religious groups. I will stop here and invite questions and queries.
Okay, well, as you said that till 18th century, Indian culture was very vibrant, strong, and well deeply rooted. But after that, of course, in principle, it's still intact. But what happened that many people attracted to Bhat and drifted from the mainstream of Indian culture? The belief was somewhere deviated from that. Was it because forcing all of the people, all the countrymen, was not possible even by the few Britishers?
This is a very long question and I will give a very short answer. You see, there are historical accidents everywhere. Once upon a time, Rome was a very important empire. Greece was a very important empire. Egypt was a very important empire. But their culture was destroyed. Indian culture is the only culture where you find narrative continuity. I accept that there was a rupture in Indian culture during 18th century. Now, why Europeans succeeded? There are two answers. One answer was given by people like Veer Savarkar and Vivekanand. Swami Vivekanand said that Indians were defeated by the British because Indians were disunited. Second answer is given by Mahatma Gandhi. He said that the British did not defeat us. Rather, we gave the British India in gift and we will take India from the British in case we decide to take it today. Now, what Gandhi was trying to say was the following. The British did not defeated the whole of India in battle. When they won in Plassey in 1757, they defeated Sujadudaulah by treachery. They bought the two commanders, the Mir Jafar and Mir Qasim, and they promised them that in case you do not fight with us sincerely, we will make you Diwan. We will make you the ruler of Bengal and we will just help you rule over Bengal. Therefore, it was not a real fight between Bengal ruler and the British. It was a treachery. But the second war, which was fought in 1764, was a fight between three forces: Bengal, Awadh, and then the Mughal Sultan Bahadur Shah Jafar. The Mughal Sultan at Delhi, because Bahadur Shah Jafar was the ruler during 1857, not 1764. Now, what I wanted to say is that I am not denying that the naval power of the British was superior to the Indian Navy. Although Indians also had their own navy, for example, the Cholas had our own navy, but in navy, the European forces were far superior to the rest. And during the British rule, the vocational education was there, but the higher education in India was not there. After the destruction of Nalanda University in 1193 by Bakhtiyar Khilji of the Ghulam Bansh, Bakhtiyar Khilji was the commander-in-chief of Altamas. There was no higher education in India. And since there was no higher education in India, there was no R&D, research and development. Therefore, in science and technology, the Europeans had some edge over the Indians. But the British brought very little army, very small army. It was not sufficient to rule over the whole of India. A particular group of Indians collaborated with the British. And since Indians were disunited, the British were able to rule over India. Now, this is natural and expected. Whenever the regime changes, there are some selfish groups in any society who collaborate with the foreigners. And in India also, there was a class of zamindars who collaborated with the British. There was a class of educated Indians, English educated Indians, who collaborated with the British. And they denigrated the Indian culture of indigenous variety. Therefore, there was new changes, new development after 18th century. And even today, India is divided into two, the Indians and Bharatiya, Bharat and India. The Indians who are living in metropolitan cities are much more influenced by Western culture than Indians who live in villages and kasbas. Therefore, I am not saying that we were not defeated by the British. I am only saying that the medieval Indian culture was not the product of the Dark Age. It was a culture of difference. It was not an inferior culture. It had its own strength. It had its own weaknesses. But it was a unique culture which should be appreciated for its wholeness, for its integrity, for its refinedness.
Okay. As you said that Britishers has edge over the technology, science and technology, but some of the Indians, even of that time, they argued that they are having, we can say, competent science and technology methods in our Vedas and other literatures. If we dig our own resources, wisdom of the country, then we can match with them.
Actually, I have not used the term Vedas today in my today's lecture. I used the term Vedas and Vedic culture in earlier lecture. Okay. Today, I would like to stress this point that during the medieval period, there was a robust bhakti movement which took place. And contemporary Indian culture or contemporary Hindu culture is not rooted in the Vedas or the Upanishads. Rather, there are 5 important pillars of contemporary Hindu culture. They were rooted in medieval India, and they are Kabir, who was an illegitimate child. Nobody knows who was the father. He was brought up by a Muslim family. Second was Tulsidas, an orphan. Third was Surdas, a visually challenged person. Fourth was Raidas, a person who was born in a low caste. The fifth was Mirabai, a widowed single woman. Therefore, contemporary Hindu culture is the product of these 5 people. These are subaltern from contemporary perspective. And they weaved a new type of synthesis in India, which took many things from Hindu culture, Hindu heritage, Hindu culture, but which also took something from its own time, changing time. Therefore, I am not saying that there is a narrative continuity from Vedic time to later Vedic time to Bhakti period and contemporary period. I am trying to say that there is a remanifestation of Indian culture. Are you getting my point?
Yes.
There was not a reform movement, as most people say, during medieval period. There was a remanifestation of Indian culture during the medieval period. For example, Tulsi's Ramcharitmanas is not a rewriting of Valmiki's Ramayana. Rather, it is a remanifestation of Indian culture, Vedic culture, post-Vedic culture. In Kabir, you have a remanifestation of Indian culture, which is a product of its own time.
Okay.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, that's correct. So, well friends, here we will conclude the lecture, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture. On behalf, I thank Dr. Amit Sharma for giving such an insightful lecture on Indian culture.